Good morning, Robin. Thank you for sharing all that you're doing with us. I'm really excited about this. You're a social worker. You have a a degree in social work. You're a licensed clinical social worker. You have a master's in social work. You're working on your PhD at Holos University. What's that degree going to be called?
Um, that's a Doctor of Theology, and the degree is in spirituality and holistic health with special emphasis in transformational psychology.
Tell us what transformational psychology is, please.
Transformational psychology, has a lot of different meanings to different people. So let me just explain to you what it is for me. Um, it's the psychology that includes the knowledge of ancient wisdom and ancient traditions, ancient healing processes, and energy medicine and energy psychology. So it's the psychology that goes beyond kind of the cognitive mind into the non-local consciousness, and where we people can transform their thoughts, feelings, behaviors through a transformational process. So there is a mystical, spiritual aspect to it as well. So it's kind of a combination of Western psychology, ancient traditions from all different religions and backgrounds, depending on the practitioner, whoever is doing the work.
If someone wanted to learn more about it, what authors, what names are associated with it as kind of key thinkers?
Um, well, I don't, not to focus on the term transformational, because we are actually, Holos is a degree program. It's a theological degree. So the reason in the beginning when they first started, Dr. Norm Shealy was the first president of Holos University, and Carolyn Miss, MYSS, who also has a PhD. They came out of the holistic energy medical intuitive. They actually coined the phrase medical intuitive. And so it was kind of the mystical combination of healing. And of course, Norm is a medical doctor. He also has a degree in psychology. So, and the first deans that were associated were Bob and Ann Nunley, who were also psychologists. But this idea of transformational came out of this holistic medicine approach, which actually morphed into energy medicine and now has really taken another morph into what we call biofield therapy or biofield science. So Dr. Norm Shealy would be one very good resource. Carolyn Miss would be another good resource. Dr. Michael,
we can put his name in the little box.
Yeah, Andrew Newberg. Dr. Andrew Newberg is a researcher at the University of Pennsylvania. He's an MD, and he, with Mark Waldman, who is also a psychologist, did a lot of research on how God changes your brain. And they developed a field and wrote a book called The Principles of Neurotheology.
Wow.
So neurotheology, which a lot of this is the basis of my research, my doctoral level of research at Holos. And that is the research that they did talks about neuroscience and how the brain functions, and whether or not mystical experience is where that comes from. Is it just, neurons gone crazy and, schizophrenia or bipolar or something? Or are there really mechanisms in the brain like little radio receivers that help you tune in to the larger field and what we call non-local consciousness? Larry Dossey has written a lot about non-local consciousness. Shamini Jain heads up and has done a lot of research on biofield science, and they actually just came out with a huge handbook of all of the newest and updated research. So there's a lot of information out there, and it's becoming more and more mainstream. But in the beginning, it was really seen as kind of woo-woo. Oh, you don't talk about it. It's kind of so. I walk a very fine line because my practice is very much mainstream, and I'm well known in my community, and at the same time, as we had discussed earlier, when I was starting about 18 years old, a little bit earlier even, I started having spiritual experiences. And so it took me a long time to be able to talk about those. And my work is really a culmination of bringing all the spiritual knowledge and experiences that I've gained over the last 50 years, really, and the mental health and substance abuse field, the field of psychology, the field of clinical social work, the field of neuroscience, psychiatry, and now energy psychology, which there's a lot of research now going on in that area as well, which combines the Western approaches to psychology with Eastern approaches, Chinese medicine and Indian approaches, Ayurvedic approaches, mystical approaches from all of the indigenous shamanism, all of that together.
In case someone wanted to explore, Dr. Jane put together with others Qi, and there's International Study for the Study of Subtle Energy and Energy Medicine. How do you pronounce it? I say ICEM, but you say it differently.
ICEM. And ICEM is actually the scientific research arm of Holos University. I think there's some confusion about that, about what ICEM is. But ICEM was originally created by Dr. Elmer Green, who was the father of biofeedback. And he and Carolyn and Norm Shealy and the Nunleys, they were all originally people that came together in a thing called Council Grove. This was in the early 80s, I believe. And they developed, so out of this group this professional group that met, they were very interested in doing research in subtle energy and subtle energy medicine. So it's the International Society for the Study of Subtle Energy and Subtle Energy Medicine. And there's a lot of research that comes out of that as well. And that is the research arm of Holos University. Holos University and ICEM were created kind of together by the same people.
That's useful. To take this kind of esoteric approach and apply it, I'm really interested in your work with adolescents, because what studies show is there's an increasing number of teens around the world, not just in the US and UK, who are anxious and depressed, more anxious than depressed. So someone like Professor Jean Twenge at San Diego, UC San Diego, says, well, it's because of social media. But I think it's a lot more. So my question is, is there more anxiety and depression, or are we just talking about it in a way where before it was taboo? If there is more, why? And then how do you treat it?
That's a great question. And that is a great subject to talk about. And there are a lot of different languages that you can talk about it in. And when I say language, I mean there's the language of Western psychology and why that might be. There are sociological reasons in our society that have evolved that would contribute to it as well. So from a sociological point of view, we talk about things like the family structure and kids coming home and having to, latchkey kids, meaning kids who are on their own a lot. They've also done a lot of studies with social media and found that even though kids are socializing more in social media, that it makes them feel more depressed and isolated because it's not really human contact. So those are, their sociological reasons, their psychological reasons, but there's also a spiritual reason. And this is what I understand. We are in creation, in the universe. There are ages. There in the Indian culture, they call them yugas.
Kalpas.
Yuga, Y-U-G-A, yugas, and in many different languages, it's the same idea. It's the concept. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is there is a shift in consciousness, and we are going from the age of reason into the age of intuition. And in order to become more intuitive, or people are becoming more intuitive because the energy in the universe, the rate of vibration is stepping up into a higher rate of vibration. And the kids that are coming in and being born into this are more attuned to energy and vibration, more intuitive, older souls, if you want to say, if you want to call it that. They're very, very, very sensitive to what's going on in the world, more sensitive. And as you gain sensitivity, then you also, if you don't have the tools to protect yourself or to understand what's your energy, what's your field, and what is someone else's or an outside energy that's coming to you, you absorb it. So a lot of these kids who are particularly in anxiety, they're really absorbing the fears and the anxiety and the uncertainty that we all experience in our culture and in the world right now. I mean, there's a lot of chaos going on in the world right now. According to the theory about yugas, we're in the Kali Yuga, which is the age of chaos. And these kids are very, very sensitive to it. But they don't know what to do about it. And in school, for example, and this relates directly to my research and my study, which is called The Effects of Biointrinsic Transformational Therapy on Depression and Anxiety in Adolescence. And it's a big, long name for something that's pretty simple. And that is biointrinsic is what is intrinsic to us, to our bio field, to our biology. That means our physical body. Our biofield is the electromagnetic field around all living things. And so what is the effect of using biointrinsic transformational, here we go with that word again, to transform transformational therapies on depression and anxiety? And I'll explain that a little bit more. But what I'm trying to say is they perceive things, but they don't know what to do about it, and it causes a lot of anxiety.
Some people call them indigo children or crystal children or rainbow children. Do you think those words are useful?
Maybe to some people if they need to categorize, but then you get into this really pedantic argument about what does it mean and who's this crystal and who's a this and who's a that. To me, it's not useful. To me, the more useful thing is to understand that it doesn't, that the teenagers are very, very sensitive to the energies around them, to the moods of the other people, to the collective consciousness, which there's a lot of fear in our society, in the world right now, a lot of fear. And they don't understand that they're taking it in, and they don't understand. So in my research, for example, I give them tools, but I also give them exercises which we do as games. I make it fun. I make it, short and fun. And what these games do is it helps them attune and become more aware of their own fields and the energies that are around them and how they can ground themselves, become more centered, protect themselves in their field, what it feels like to be in their own field. And then we're all receivers and transmitters. We're like radio towers or cell towers or whatever. We transmit energy and we receive it. And when they understand that they can transmit and affect other people as well, and they can receive, and then they are also affected by that. When they start to learn about that, then they have more control about what they want to be projecting. So rather than be projecting fear and anger and all kinds of what we call lower vibrations, they can come up into their heart field. And I teach them how to do that with certain breathing exercises to come into their heart, attune their mind with their heart. The vagus nerve gets activated and the whole system calms down. And they then have the ability to project what they want to project into the world. And they're very sensitive to it. So then they learn how to protect themselves so that when they're feeling out of sync, they can go back into that safe place, into that grounded place, and project what they want to project. And it's very empowering for them. And that's really important for teenagers.
Before we go into some of those specific exercises and tools, you're looking for a second round of participants. Where would they live? Who are you looking for?
Thank you for asking. I am actually in the third year of this study. The first year, which is what I wrote my dissertation on, is the first 34 kids, teens that I had come through my study. And then the second year I was able to get 25 teens from a local alternative school. And I facilitated with that. And then I was going to do another year because I need another 25 to 30 teens to do a full study. My study is really for 80 teens to find, statistical significance. So I have 52 teens that have already gone through. So I'm looking for another 30 teens. And prior to COVID and the shutdown, I was going to go back into Unity North Atlanta, which is a church, a non-denominational, all faiths type of environment in Marietta, Georgia, and also Furtaw Academy, Prep Academy in Woodstock, Georgia. So it was very limited to the kids, that could actually come. But now with COVID, I have IRB approval to do it online. So that really, in a way, opens it up. It makes it a little more difficult in terms of recruitment, but it opens it up. So at this point in time, it really doesn't matter where the teen is if they commit to the full study, which would be no more than 7 group meetings, and I'm trying to make it less. So it's about 6 group meetings. There's an orientation meeting, 4 90-minute sessions that are the intervention, which is a combination of 3 different kinds of exercises and games, and then a debriefing kind of post-testing session as well. And now we can do it all on Zoom.
And so age 13 to 19?
13 to 18. The cutoff is 18 years old.
Okay.
And that was because of the Beck Youth inventories that I'm using for my pre and post testing are normed for that age, and also because of the high school, that was the age that is really the cutoff for high school. So if you're at least 13 years old and you're no more than 18 years old, then you would be an appropriate candidate. And it's a sample of convenience, meaning the person who's interested selects themselves. Now, there is randomization. There's random assignment to either the experimental or the waitlist control group. Means there's 2 groups, Group A and Group B. And once they enroll and fill out all the paperwork and have a little interview with me just to make sure that they understand everything and that they want to agree to the study. So there's no cost. It's free. There's no cost to join. If they feel they want to drop out, they can drop out of the study if they want to. It's voluntary. But I do really want them to be able to commit to being involved in the whole study. It's very important. And then because of ethics, the people who are in the control group, so Group A starts with the intervention first, Group B does the pre and post testing during that time, and then after the intervention with the A group, the B group gets exactly the same intervention. So it's called a waitlist control.
Sweet.
Then we test again at the end of the whole thing.
Could you share with us some of the kind of tools that the teens would be using?
Yes. Excuse me. Yeah. Well, first of all, what I know about adolescents and teenage brains is that the very first thing that develops in our brain, anybody, this is human brain science, the very first thing that develops is the amygdala, which is the fight or flight area of the brain. It tells us, signals that we're in danger. Danger, 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 danger. That's fully developed by the time we're 1 year old. Wow. So what the studies that they've done with adolescents and MRI studies of their brains, normal kids, and they did a study where they did MRI studies of normal adults and normal teenagers, and they showed them the same faces, different emotions. What they found was that the teenagers identified the faces as negative emotions much more often than the adults did. The adults were able to discern the faces as other emotions, but the teenagers saw negative emotions a lot more, normal people. And the reason for that is because of the brain development. The amygdala is very active, but the frontal lobe, which is our executive function, which helps us make judgments and organize and have critical thinking and organize ourselves and analytical thinking, all of that doesn't mature until we're about 25. So when you try to do something like cognitive behavioral therapy with a 13 or a 15-year-old, you get someone who's really got a really high functioning amygdala, but not such a fully functioning executive function. So knowing that, my exercises are, number one, they're short, they're fun, they need to be fun and engaging. They're things that they do, they're hands-on, so that they're not doing a lot of executive functioning, and they teach the adolescents how to calm their amygdala. That's the very first thing that we do. But I do use very low-tech science toys to show them, different things. So, for example, in the beginning, there is a little science toy called a UFO ball, which you can get on Amazon. And this ball actually shows that we are made out of electricity and that we're connected. So, for example, the ball has 2 metal points, and if you put your finger on one of them, and then you put your finger on the other one, it lights up and makes a noise. So what we know is that all the cells of our bodies have positive and negative charges, and they're like little mini batteries that create light. In our system, we have a lot of light. If we're healthy, we have more light. So this kind of shows that we do that. Now, in a group, I can hold hands with a lot of people. It doesn't really even matter the number. And the person on the end will put their finger and it will create a circuit. And if the circuit is cut anywhere along, like someone drops their hand, it'll go off. So they get to see this idea. The other thing that I use is a little science toy called the light crystal. And it's a prism. And, it's really, there are a lot of people around who can perceive with their visual eye the auras or the electromagnetic fields of people and things. But most people don't know, actually, that they can do that, and they're not sensitive, and they've never done that before. So this is kind of a really easy way for people to start to see fields. And what you do is, when you look through a prism, the light is refracted. So what we do with the teenagers is we do some of the energy exercises. One is activating our fields using our hands and getting to feel, what's in between our hands and making energy balls, which kind of comes out of the Tai Chi. Some of the Qigong, Tai Chi kinds of
approaches. Yeah.
Approaches, sorry. And anyway, but if you look at somebody through a prism while they're doing it, you see their whole field light up. It's really interesting. The color, so I have them look, and before we do that, I have somebody look and say, well, what colors do you see? They usually say things like, well, I see red, or I see blue, or, they see dark colors. Then we start activating our fields, and they look and they say, oh, my gosh, the colors are so bright, and they're all the colors of the rainbow, and now you have purple and yellow and pink, and, they get all excited because they then can see what we can only see through certain devices. Sorry.
That's no problem. Modern life. This is really exciting.
I forgot to turn it off. Okay.
I love that prism. That's a great demonstration.
Yes, somebody showed that to me to do it, and I thought this is fabulous for the kids in my research group who I'm talking about this, but they can't perceive it, they can't see it, they whatever. And I started using it and putting it into my protocol. And the kids were really, they loved it. They loved, can I do it? Can I do it? Let me try, let me try. So that's another thing. The other thing is measuring energy fields using metal. And we have these things called dowsing rods, which are metal, and we know that energy responds to metal. So what we did is, my husband and I, we looked online and we made dowsing rods from a hanger. And you can find the instructions online how to do that. And then, so this is just a regular hanger with a straw. And I put tape on the bottom of the straw so it wouldn't fall off. And what I do is I hold the hanger with the straw so they see that I'm not moving it. And actually I can even do it online because it measures the field, and then if I ask them to imagine expanding their field and opening up the dowsing rods, they open. And if I say, bring it in, bring your energy in, wrap your energy around you, they close. And the other thing is that you can do it with thoughts. So I might say to them, think of a really happy thought. And they see that the edges of the dowsing rods go out. The field opens up. And then I say, think of something, really sad or really disturbing, and it closes. So they can see that they can open it and they can close it. And some of the kids get really good at it, and they can do it with their fingers. I've seen kids go like this, and the rods open and close. So they start to like feel their power, which is part of what I'm trying to teach them to do.
And then what kind of techniques do you teach them to stay grounded, centered, protected once they realize they can do that?
Right. So my protocol is really simple. I got permission from HeartMath to use the heart-focused breathing and quick coherence technique. And Jeff Golitz, who does education and outreach for HeartMath, was wonderful and gave me some handouts from their teen program, Wise Heart, Smart Brain, I think is what it's called. But I have the handouts so that they're oriented for teens, and they explain exactly. And we start off the protocol with, I teach them how to breathe, do the heart-focused breathing, which is diaphragmatic breathing from, your lower abdomen. And then you add the awareness of the beating of the rhythm of your heart, which should, under normal circumstances, beat around 60 to 70 beats per minute. And interestingly enough, the 60 beats per minute is the same hertz as one of the primary vibrations of the earth. So I have them put their feet on the floor flat and sit comfortably and breathe, and then attune their mind with the beating of their heart. So the breathing is in through the nose and out through the mouth. Pursed lips like they're blowing out a candle. Slow, because for the vagus nerve to get the message that they're safe, they have to blow out slowly. They attune to their beating of their heart. The feet are on the floor. They're not, crossing over the midline anywhere. So their energy is flowing. They understand because I've shown them drawings of the toroidal energy field, which comes in through the top of the head, which, I don't use the words chakras in my research because it can be misunderstood. But, it is the crown chakra, but it's the energy center where, the energy comes in and flows down and around. So, and I explained to them kind of using the image of water coming in, like if you were taking a shower and it was washing you through, and if the water is flowing, it gets rid of all the dark, gooky, dirty stuff. And so I use that, the heart math breathing, and then we do the interim, the second exercise and games all have to do with energy. So we activate through the hands, we do making energy balls, and then I show them how to intensify through eye movements and bilateral stimulation, which actually it does a lot of things. It actually detoxes the brain and discharges negative emotions from different memories. And this is what's used in EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
Francine Shapiro.
But my form of it is just that I show them that it intensifies the energy, and it does. If you do it and you increase the speed, you actually increase the voltage of your energy field, which is very interesting. And then I also do things like push and pull. So we grab people's fields and we pull them and we push them. They have their eyes closed and they're kind of wobbly and they can feel. And then I show them that they can heal each other, or they can at least feel the energy coming from each other. So we, get somebody who has my back hurts or my knee hurts or something like that. And we all activate our energy. We send, with our intention, loving energy through our hands. And the person who is receiving that does usually feel the warmth and the tingling. Now, I'm not training people to be healers, but I do want them to understand, the kids, that they have power, that they don't even realize they have, and sensitivity, and they can do a whole lot more with it than they think they can do. And then the last exercise is a 20-minute deep relaxation with guided imagery. The guided imagery is healing light, bringing in the light that they need for their healing today, the color or colors. And then it ends with the place of peace, and a warm and loving being, a wise and loving being comes to join you in your place of peace. So it kind of ends with that. The love and appreciation is very healing for depression. That's also the quick coherence, the breathing, and then we think of some person, place, thing, activity that they love and appreciate. So we bring in love and appreciation in the beginning. We bring in love and appreciation at the end. So there's the process. What I find is if I try to do energy activation and sensitivity before I do the breathing, they don't feel it. They are not sensitive enough because they're not, as you said, grounded. They're not focused. They're not feeling their own self and their own field. So we calm them down. They learn to calm down and ground and feel their own energy field. And then we do the energy work. And then we end with this very deep relaxation with healing light. So whatever color comes to them, and at the end I ask them, what was your color? And they don't know what the colors mean. Then I direct them to, look it up. And it's amazing how accurate those colors are that they bring in.
What's an example of a color meaning?
Oh, I'll give you an example. One example is that a young man a young, teen, um, had a lot of difficulty speaking out. He was very, very shy, introverted, had a lot of fear. And again, my research is not therapy, so I just know this from doing these exercises with him. And in one of his guided imageries, early on, I said, I asked for what the kid's colors were, and he said mine was light blue. And I said, well, do you know what that color is? And he said no. And I told him to look it up, and I said, but would you like to know what that means? And then I told him there is an energy center in our throat that resonates and has a color associated with that vibration, which is light blue. And that is our communication and speaking our truth and all. So you were, in your healing, you were bringing in the vibration that you needed to work on that issue. So that's an example.
So what have you found in year 1 and year 2? What kind of results could you put on paper that we've seen such and such a change?
Great question. So the results of the first group of 34, there were 7 kids that dropped out for various reasons. Some of them moved, some of them never started. So it didn't really have to do with being in the study. It was kind of extraneous reasons. So I ended up with 27 kids. And what I found from doing a statistical analysis using, SPSS, right? My brain, when I start talking about this, the analytical part of my brain, which is there, kind of goes on hold for a minute. So what we found, we used the Beck inventories for depression and anxiety, and we used a visual analog scale for before and after each session. And both the control and the intervention group both did the testing each time. And what we found was that there were, we did not have statistical significance because we only had, the reason is it's an underpowered study. It's not the full study. So this is kind of the proof of concept part of the study where we were saying, okay, do we see any effect? And all of the statistics, all of the graphs, all of the plot lines went in the right direction. So what you would see is you'd see the control group either flat or a little bit, or even a little bit elevated in some instances. And you would see the intervention group going down. So there was a precipitous drop in anxiety and depression over that 4-week period when we compared the groups. It did not reach statistical significance because I didn't have enough teens. That's why I'm looking for more teens. So it's going in that direction. So that's very promising. It's very promising. The thing that was interesting is we did the analysis for 3 sessions, and we did them for 4 sessions. And after 4 sessions, there was a significant drop, particularly in the visual analog scales. They actually did show some statistical significance after 4 sessions. After 3 sessions, the kids on the anxiety scales showed more of a change. The depression was in the right direction, but it took 4 sessions for them to actually show the statistical difference. And when we have 80 kids, we'll see, but it's all in the right direction. What I'm finding is that the anxiety will drop quicker than the depression, but the depression does decrease. It just takes longer.
Did you find any differences based on age or gender? Like younger kids, older kids, boys, girls, non-binary?
Yeah. Well, that's a really good question too. I wasn't tracking for that. So in this study, I have not broken out the statistics for that. I do know how many. We did demographics, and we knew how many. I think there were about 70% female versus 30% male in the complete sample, which is they're self-selecting, so that says something too about it. We found that about a quarter of all of the kids had a diagnosis of depression and or anxiety, and and about a quarter of them were on medication. Of just in general, all the kids. We do know that a third, the general statistics on anxiety in adolescence is that one out of every 3 adolescent has an anxiety disorder. So we know that.
What is that a new thing, or is that something
that's not new. This is the National Institute of Health.
But every year. Were kids in a century ago likely to be as anxious and depressed, or is it a result of social changes?
Well, the National Institute of Health, they do a big annual report. They track millions of adolescents, but they did not start. They started off tracking adults. They didn't start tracking adolescents until 2004. So the data only goes back to 2004. But about 2 years ago, which is the most recent data that we really have, the increase in depression and anxiety in adolescents had gone up, 60 to 80%. So there is something that's going on, and I really do believe it has to do with things that are going on in the world and the sensitivity of the kids, and also some of the societal changes, in terms of families and all of the other issues that go into it.
I'm working on a book about young girl climate activists from around the world, and they talk about eco-anxiety. I mean, they're worried because they don't think they'll have a future. They don't think that they should bring babies into a world that's going to destruct. So that's another element, is just
exactly.
Yeah.
And I don't think I don't think they've tracked any of those things. So and this is relatively new. So, I don't know that there are any correlations statistically that we can prove, but we certainly know intuitively that those things, that's correct. But look at how much fear there is.
With COVID and
everything that's so uncertain. I mean, COVID is one, as you say, climate change is another. Politically, what's going on in the world, all of the underpinning of all of the negative stuff in the world. It's kind of almost like I don't want to get too graphic, but I use the image of a pimple. When we have an eruption in our skin, what happens is, you have the infection. It's going on under the surface. You can't see it. You don't know it's there. But then you get this little bump that starts to come out, and then it gets pussy and everything. Well, what does a pimple have to do? It has to erupt. It has to come out. And I think that's what's happening now, is that we have all this fear underneath the surface, and it's starting to erupt and come out, and now we're seeing how messy it is. And that's the stage before healing. I mean, healing can't take place unless that happens.
When do Hindus say the Kali Yuga will end, or when does it tail off? Where are we in that yuga?
Yeah, I really don't know the answer to that. My sense is that we are going into the end of that. Maybe that's wishful thinking, but I feel like we're in that transition. But we've been in that transition for a long time. I mean, going back to the 30s and or even before, World War I, World War II, all of the things. So I think we've been in it for a long time. I really do have, intuitively, I feel, I perceive that the manifestation of love and higher consciousness it's happening, but it's happening in the few now, but it will happen with the many. It will happen with the masses. It generally takes, if you look at the idea of avatar and the incarnation of God consciousness into human form, and you look at the manifestation and how long it usually takes 100 years after that God teacher leaves the planet to manifest. And in my belief system, Avatar Meher Baba is the latest avatar incarnation of this cycle of time, of ages. And he dropped his physical body in 1969. So, we're halfway through that first 100 years.
What do you think about the increase of kids on the autism spectrum? There's so many now. I think the most visible is Greta Thunberg. They're amazing kids, to those high-functioning autistic kids with Asperger's. Why more? Is it just because we're doing better labeling, or what's going on?
So again, it's a great question. And my impulse is to want to answer it on several levels. So we can take the psychological level. We can take the physical level too. There's more toxins I mean, look at, for example, immunizations. When I'm 68, I was born in 1952. I didn't have any immunizations until I was about 7 years old, and I had a polio. That was one. I had polio vaccination, and a little bit later, I had a tetanus shot, and I had a TB test, an inoculation years later. Okay. But look at what the CDC schedule for immunizations for kids are right now. On day one, if you're born in a hospital, they want to give you a hepatitis shot. And the immunization schedule, I mean, they're giving young kids, 8 vaccines at the same time. I mean, so the amount of toxins that are going into kids' systems from the environment and also just from, the healthcare profession is way more than it was. So from that point of view, I think there's more autism. You see, they're neurological problems. It's not just autism. There's all kinds of respiratory problems. If you look at children's health, you'll see the increase in so many chronic diseases. So that's one level of it. The other thing that's quite interesting idea is if you do believe in reincarnation, And you also believe that there's existence on other planets and other galaxies and all. One idea is that on Earth, on our planet, we are able to achieve the balance of head and heart. And we come to learn higher levels of love and be more in balance with our head and our heart. But there's some planets that souls incarnate where there's that disparity. So some planets, they're very, very intellectual. They have all head, but no heart, and vice versa. So in my opinion, if you take that point of view, some of these kids could be very easily have incarnated from other planets where they're just very mental. They're coming from, so that's another idea that who knows, but it's possible.
That makes me think of the University of Virginia study that Ian Stevenson started of kids who reincarnate and remember their past lives. And I think it's something like 75%, I'm not sure of that are gender fluid, because maybe they were male in the previous life and they're female here and they're still kind of adjusting to it. So there's 2,500 cases and more of kids who remember very specific details. So that may have some part to play as well. I don't know.
Yes. Well, I trained with Brian and Carol Weiss at Omega Institute in 2008 in past life regression therapy. So I'm certified and trained, by them in past life regression therapy. And at that time, I heard of Ian Stevenson. I have his books, and looked at his research. But in 2008, I started doing past life regression with my clients. And a lot of my teenage clients love past life regression, by the way. And I've had a number of those kids who came in to me saying, I'm in a female body, but I really think I should be male, or vice versa. There's kind of this gender fluidity. And we do a regression. One case, one young teenager, very amazing soul to work with. She came in saying, I'm really a boy. I should be a boy. And wonderful artist. She would draw these wonderful pictures, beautiful pictures. And I did a past life regression. I did more than one, but one of them was very striking. And it was one in which she was a young male, and it was in the 70s. And so there were things in her guided session imagery that came out that she would not have known about consciously, I don't think. She described a record player, for example, and it was exactly the kind that my husband, because we grew up in the 70s, my husband had when he was in college. He had this record player, kind of Victrola type thing with, she was not in that, she wouldn't really know about that, but she described that. And in her memory, she was in a relationship, and she was a male. So the girl that she was in a relationship with murdered her. In this regression session, she remembered, being murdered, and she was murdered young. So when we were processing it, and it's not as horrible as it sounds too, so people shouldn't get scared that when you're doing a past life regression, there are ways to see it and experience it that where you don't actually have an abreaction, which it means that you're in it and you're feeling it as if it's happening. Although that I could handle that because I'm a therapist, so I'm very, very weary of people doing past life regression with someone who's not a therapist, who's not trained really to handle these things, because it could happen. I have had people do regression sessions and they absolutely go back into it as if it's happening right now and it's traumatic. And so you have to know how to work with that. But there are other ways too where they can kind of see it from above, kind of more of a dissociative, watching it happen, but not experiencing it. And if they're comfortable, they can see it that way as well. And so it was not traumatic for her. She saw it, and she realized that maybe her feelings about being male was that she just never got to fulfill that lifetime, that she was murdered in the middle of it. And then they also start realizing, once they do past life regression, that sometimes they're male, sometimes they're female, and that the soul doesn't have a gender. I mean, we've been so many things. We've been male and female and different colors, different cultures, different backgrounds, different, so many times that it could be that the reason that somebody's having a gender fluidity is that they're getting ready to incarnate from one gender to another. And they start having the attributes and having the feelings, and they're drawn to that. It could be that. Or it could be that they've just come from the other gender. Or, like in her case, it was traumatic. She was one gender, and she got murdered, and she didn't know what to do with that. I think there's a lot of reasons why that happens.
Did it lead her to become more comfortable with being a girl, or she was still, no, I really need to be a boy?
It's interesting because I've seen it go many ways. As a therapist, I don't always get feedback. When they finish or they leave, I don't always get feedback. But in this case, I did get feedback from another family member. And so when I was working with her, she was still struggling with this, and she had a girlfriend, and she thought, well, maybe I'm gay, or maybe I'm bi, or, she was kind of struggling with her whole identity issue. And then she went off to college, and we stopped working together, and I hoped she would work with somebody else. And then later, another family member came in as a client, and I said, oh, what happened to so-and-so? And they said, oh, you'll never believe it. She got married, and she has children, and she's very girlish. And so it was a totally different outcome. Now, the other could happen too, that somebody really feels, okay, I really am, and I want to I'm trans, or I'm bi, or I'm asexual. I don't have a gender. It can go a lot of different ways.
Another thing that's really prominent about Generation Y and Z, especially Z, is that they're very accepting of diversity, and they don't really care what your color is or your sexual orientation or whatever. I've really found that with my interviews with these girls around the world. It's not just a U.S. phenomenon. They're very accepting and egalitarian, and they're very concerned about social justice. They're not just fighting for climate. They're fighting for how it affects people and justice. So I wonder if you found that in your work with adolescents, that they're different, this Generation Z, and in what ways besides those, maybe?
Well, that's a really good point, and I think it really goes back to in my world, in my view of creation and spirituality and how it goes. And in full disclosure, I when I was 18. Before I was 18, actually, I started having spiritual experiences and not really knowing what it was. And then when I was a freshman in college, I got introduced to my English professor, who introduced me to a spiritual teacher named Meher Baba. And so from the time I was 18, I started, reading spiritual books, not only from Meher Baba, but Yogananda and Edgar Cayce, and just a really wide variety, and all of the Christian mystics, And my mother, I come from a Jewish tradition, so my mother was very confused, I think, about, my spirituality, which seemed to be more encompassing of all the different religions.
And you're a reverend, so you have a theology title to your name.
I do now, yes. Last year I was ordained through Holos University in the All Faiths Church, which is affiliated with Holos, and the reason that I find that is a very kind of natural outcome is that I really have incorporated all faiths. I really do believe that the mysticism, the essence of all the religions, is really one essence that is described in different ways, but it's really
called
the same.
Perennial philosophy. That's a label for it.
Good. Yeah. Well, that makes a lot of sense. So what you were asking me, though, is in that view, I do see the evolution of consciousness. I understand, my understanding is that God in the beyond state, which is kind of the formless, unconscious form of energy, power, love, God, whatever that intelligence is in the universe, that is, is of all creation, that the spiritual journey is one through the evolution of consciousness, not the evolution of form, but form comes out of the consciousness. So the consciousness evolves, and then it goes through there's 276 subtle gases. And then after the subtle gases is the first gas that is on the plane that we know, that's the gross plane, the material plane. The gases, actually the subtle gases and all, and the energies and stuff is what they're teaching in school now called plasma. They teach 4 states of matter now. They include plasma. And this is the kind of the plasma part of it. And then it comes through the different forms. Consciousness evolves. So it goes through rock form, and then it goes through different, all the different animal forms. And then in human form, we have a fully evolved consciousness from a material time-space point of view. And then we start the involution process, or going inside to, so the consciousness can grow and expand, and then we become God realized, we become one again with the oversoul or the God and beyond state, except now we're doing it with consciousness, with full consciousness. So it's kind of the game that God plays, that who am I? I am God. That's the game. And so in this evolution of consciousness, I do feel that the teenagers, going back to your question about teens, they are in a different level of consciousness. The souls that are coming in now are coming in to this kind of energy, intuitive, as you say, fluidity, consciousness. They're not so entrenched in the world of physical matter and time-space. So they're more non-local, they're more accepting. I mean, out of that consciousness comes love and acceptance, and that we know that the form is not the essence of what the thing is. And they understand that. They understand that at a very deep level. So it doesn't surprise me. I mean, it's wonderful always to see it. And I think the kids are struggling with that, though, because they don't understand what they're perceiving sometimes. And that's where the anxiety and depression comes in, because they don't understand what they're perceiving.
Hmm.
But then when they do, they become more comfortable with
Because they
themselves.
have control. They have some control. Last question is, if you were suggesting books to help parents of teenagers, I think of How to Talk So Your Teens Will Listen and Listen So Your Teens Will Talk. What are your favorite books for parents of teens?
That's a great question. My book that I haven't written yet will be one of those books. My dissertation, which I'm finishing up and will be published by the end of the year, is not really in a readable form, but has a lot of that information in it. So there's a lot of different ways. I think one thing that I find very, very useful is where is it? Let me see. Andrew Newberg and Mark Waldman's book called How God Changes Your Brain. And the reason that I like it is they did all these studies with different brains and looked at all the different kinds of religious and mystical approaches. And what they found was that it did not matter what kind of prayer you did or what kind of meditation that you did, but if you were doing certain things, that they had a positive effect on the brain. And so they call that brain enhancement. And in their book, they have a whole section on brain enhancement exercises in the book. And some of those things, which is, the progressive relaxation that we do and the different kinds of breathing that we do, smiling and laughing are really good ways. Another way, smiling stimulates brain circuits that enhance social interaction, empathy, and mood. And laughing stimulates different neural pathways. So laughing and humor, that's really good for kids, for teens. The other thing is yawning and doing about 10 to 12 yawns, which gets oxygen flowing and it relaxes the brain and all of that. So it's called deep yawning. Meditation, of course. I think kids have got to learn how anaerobic exercise, they talk about that. Dialoguing with others. So if parents want to connect with their kids, they have to talk to them and not judge them and not tell them what to do. Talking to a teenager is not telling them what to do. They will turn off in a minute. You ask them questions. You ask them what they think about things. Don't tell them they're wrong. Just say, that's a really interesting way to think about that. I hadn't thought about that before. And then, you could also share a consideration. Gee, I need to think about that. Well, have you thought of this? So it becomes a dialogue, and that's a really good way. But as for other books and all that, I would actually have to think more about that. There's a wonderful book on parenting. Actually, this is good, and I use it a lot. This is the old version, the 1970s or 80s version of it. I know there's a newer one, but it's called Growing Up Again, Parenting Our Children, Parenting Ourselves and Parenting Our Children by Clark and Dawson. And it actually comes out of the addiction field, because a lot of people who are parents who grew up in alcoholic or drug-addicted families did not get good parenting. And what I like about this book is it has, there are two aspects. There's structure and nurture. So structures are rules, and they have a structure chart in here, and nurture, which is love and caring, and they have a chart in here which talks about the extremes. So, like if you have no parenting at all, there's no structure. That's not good for kids either. Too rigid a structure is not good for kids. The other thing it has is the ages and stages of development as well. So that's actually good. Ages and stages is the Ericksonian stages of development. I think they have to realize what stage the teenager is in and what their developmental task is for that age. And individuation, becoming an individual, learning what they think and feel kind of by themselves on their own is a big part of it. So if you try to put a rigid structure there, you're going to get pushback, or you're going to get a very compliant kid who internalizes and then becomes depressed and anxious. So
those are good resources. I also put together a book called The Teen Trip, and it was based on young people's own experiences with every topic that you could think of. So it's like a peer support group. And I did a book for kids called How to Survive Your Parents' Divorce, Kids' Advice to Kids, because I really like peer.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah, and I did a meditation CD for kids called Kids Mind Power. And it has how to ground and center and achieve goals and stuff that's fun.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah, this has been so informative and interesting. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we say sayonara?
Right. Well, if I could give a shout out for my research, I am looking for 30 more kids. I am recruiting starting now. I'm actually doing one group now, and I finish up at the end of December with them. But I'm recruiting now.
How would they contact you?
Okay, so, and I'll be recruiting through January, and then we'll start in February. February, March, and April will be the when I do the intervention. So how they can reach me, first of all, they can, if they want to email me, my email is robinopp, ROBINOPP, @bellsouth.net. They can find me on LinkedIn, Robin Reeves-Oppenheim, REEVES-OPPENHEIM. They can find me on Psychology Today. My office is in Woodstock, Georgia. So if they actually Google Robin Reeves-Oppenheim, a lot of things will come up. LinkedIn, Psychology Today. I'm on Facebook, Robin Reeves-Oppenheim. My email is robinopp@bellsouth.net. My office number in Woodstock is 678-445-4184, so they could certainly call. And again, I'm doing it on Zoom. Everything's on Zoom, so they can be anywhere. I'm not restricted.
No time, no space.
No time, no space.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.